All right, Kingkillers, we're covering chapter 127 in this episode. Talk about Kvothe and Penthe having a little sexy time and talking about man mothers. And in the beginning of the episode, me and Tim talk about how we're going to be covering House of the Dragon. We're going to be doing live streams on YouTube, going through, doing a deep dive, rewatch of that. And we spend a little time shitting on Rings of Power. So that's the main episode. Is once we get into the discussion of the chapter 127 for the Wise Man's Fear, that starts around the 25-minute mark. So just give you a heads up there. But yeah, outside of that, enjoy the show. All right, welcome back to the Kingkiller podcast. I'm Dan. Got with me Tim. What's going on?
I'm here. Hello.
Hey.
Yes.
So back after a little hiatus. Had a little hurricane roll through Florida, and that kind of threw us off our little stride a little bit. But we are back, and we're gonna be diving into chapter 127. We're gonna get to the Man Mothers chapter. Quick update, because we are going to be starting a stream. We're going to do a live stream on our coverage of House of the Dragon. So we're going to do a deep dive rewatch into House of the Dragon. And we're going to, at least for the first episode, we'll do a live stream. If it goes without any hitches, we'll just continue doing it through live stream. Otherwise, we might end up just recording the episodes. But the plan for now is to do live streams so that we can interact with people. People can, ask questions or, throw out their different perspectives, and we can kind of interact with people who are watching it live. So follow us, subscribe to our YouTube channel for one, because that will probably, be doing that a week from Saturday. So that should be around November 5th. Would be our first recording as of now. That looks like when we'll do it, but once I have the definitive time and date, I will post that on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter and YouTube and subscribe to those. But what we'll do with it is we'll go through and talk about it, similar how do we do the Kingkiller Chronicles, where we just go through scene by scene and talk about it and what we thought and all those kind of things. But then I'll give some of the background from the source material, like give background on characters like Corlys Velaryon and the previous kings before Viserys and Jaehaerys and different decisions that they've made that kind of led up, that culminated in what we see in House of the Dragon, and also give some of the background on the dragons and just go dig into the source material and compare and contrast it to the show, and just kind of do similar to what we do with the Kingkiller Chronicles. But I've got my notes done for episode 1, so that should be pretty fun. That'll be fun to go through.
That's a cool. I mean, the fact that we have all that material from previous to the show itself is great, right? Because I mean, that's one thing about Martin, man. Everything leads to something else. And so it's really kind of begging for that type of a deeper dive. But I'm going to take the controversial viewpoint that I just don't care for it.
Yeah.
Not really into
it
any of it.
insists on itself.
Yeah. It's pretty insistent.
Yeah, he's great because you'll get similar to kind of how Rothfuss approaches storytelling, where a lot of the stuff is leading to, there's events that he tells and that, seem to kind of stand alone. But then once you know the full scope of the story, you see that these were all just pieces that were inevitably leading down a certain path. And you don't discover what that path is until you go back and do a reread. But there's events, there's decisions that Aegon the Conqueror made, Maegor made, Jaehaerys made, that all laid the groundwork for what culminates in House of the Dragon. So it's really interesting the way he laid everything out.
Well, it's really great. I mean, even like the extreme circumstances, there's justifiable means to get to those extreme circumstances, which that's the secret. That's the that's the key to making great. That's the key to great storytelling.
Oh
Is
yeah.
to be able to have that be a justified end rather than just suddenly some crazy ass thing happens that out of nowhere, and you're just like, oh, I guess that character's a nutcase. Like that's not what you get. You get everything that happens. It happens for what would be a justifiable reason.
Yeah, even if you don't agree with
But their
what they end up
actions,
doing, but
yeah.
you at least can understand why they did it, what broke them. But then also, like when you're reading like the events I'm talking about with Aegon the Conqueror, the decisions he made when you first read them, you don't think anything of it. It's just a decision he made, and it's once you go back through it, then you're like, oh, had he done this, this was a key moment. You didn't realize it was a key moment until you know what happens in the latter part of the Targaryen reign. But when you see it the first time, you just kind of, it's just information that you process and you move on. You don't
Mm-hmm.
realize how pertinent it is to the overall scope of the story that he's telling, that happens generations later, where you see that if Aegon had done this or that, made some kind of changes, he could have stopped all that happened after him. He could have put all that to bed, and just by
Mm.
their inactions or the decisions they made, where it seems perfectly rational, it seems like a perfectly rational decision. Like you don't think when you're reading it, like, oh, this is going to be a problem. You don't think anything of it. But then once you realize what happens, you're like, oh shit, that was a major blunder.
That's really, I mean, that's great because I mean, you can say that about uh, what happens in the House of the Dragon with the king. I mean,
Oh
he's
yeah,
constantly trying to teeter back and forth, and he has to make very difficult decisions as any king would. But even when it's just, it's so great. I mean, like the casting was so great, the directing's so on point because you can see he just wants. Like, can't we all just get along? There's a lot of
yeah,
that
yeah,
energy coming out of him, and he created a lot of these problems, which he inherited a lot of the problems too. And it was all good intentions,
yeah.
but it all falls apart, which is fuck, man. It's great. It's I mean, like I was saying, it's perfect to delve into. So yeah, I'm excited to go further into it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. That's A Song of Ice and Fire, and the stories in Westeros, and then the stories in Temerant with Kingkiller Chronicles. Those are probably my two favorite series to kind of dive into and dissect. So because I couldn't really do that with Game of Thrones, it's nice that I can do it with House of the Dragon and not have to worry about, getting spoiled by the show because the book's, not finished. This story that they're telling is finished. So, yeah, it'll be real fun to go through.
You don't want to do Rings of Power?
Yeah, Rings of Power is a little rough, man. That's like painful to try to sit through. Like I try to get through the episodes and I just get mad at the sloppy writing and just the illogical decisions. Like none of it makes any sense. And then you get
I,
to the end and it's like you just keep the decision making is worse on the second. If you were going through it a second time, the decisions once you know what happened,
what?
then it's like all this is even dumber.
That's a sign of you've really fucked up. It's I was watching it just for like the curiosity's sake. Everybody talking shit. There's some people talking shit. Other people trying to like support it, whatever. So I was just gonna watch it just for that curiosity's sake. I couldn't do it anymore. I don't have that much type of time to just throw away.
No.
Because it ends up being it's not entertaining enough.
And look,
Frankly.
if you like this show, that's perfectly fine. There's subjective opinion. You can like what you like. I don't give a shit. Like I don't expect everybody's gonna like House of the Dragon. I don't expect everybody's gonna like Kingkiller Chronicles. I really don't care if you don't like series that I like, and I don't care if you like series I dislike. Don't care. Like whatever you like. So you don't have to agree with me on it. But as far as my view on the show, like I hate it because it hits all the nerves on what I hate about how corporations and Hollywood handle adaptations a lot of the time. They did this very similar to, like, my big complaint with video game adaptations is they just take the name and then they throw in some Easter eggs that are from the story, but the story they tell is almost completely of their own devising. Sometimes completely of their own devising. It has nothing to do with the story they're supposedly adapting. And it's a spit in the face in the way I view it. It's like you're taking this IP, you're like, well, this is very popular, but these guys don't know how to fucking tell a story. I know how to tell a story, so I'll take their name and the character names and that, and then I'll just tell my own story, which will be way better than their story because they're stupid video game developers and they don't know shit.
What a strange thing to do, because like the idea is this already has an audience, so let's cash in on that and then piss all those people off.
Yeah,
or disappoint
it's
them,
why video game adaptations almost always are terrible. And every now and again you'll get a good movie, but it's a terrible adaptation.
And it can't, if it's a movie, it can't come anywhere close. I was going to say a movie can't come anywhere close. It should be a series because most games, they're that long. And if the story's engaging, which video games, dude, some of the stories are amazing.
Yeah.
Just stick to it.
Red Dead Redemption 2, I would love to see that story. The Last of Us is coming out with a show on HBO. I love the story of that video game. I hope they do it justice. But I don't have much faith in video game adaptations. But then with like the Rings of Power, you're adapting Tolkien. You're not only adapting like a good writer, you're adapting one of the greatest writers of all time, and he laid a path before you. And you're even with just the limited material that they had to adapt, and since they're not adapting an actual novel, they're basically adapting footnotes. But there's a path that he laid out. All you have to do is follow that path, and then you have plenty of room to explore and expand and flesh out that path with your own creative ideas, but staying within the confines of the path that he set. And they're just like, nah, fuck that. This guy doesn't. It's just Tolkien. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
That in itself kind of makes me want to do a comparison of House of the Dragon, because they stick. It's a great model, right? Because House of the Dragon covers a time that there's not that much information about. Mm-hmm. There's enough that you can flesh it out, and they did a tremendous job of fleshing it out, sticking to parts of the story, right, and then fleshing it out further in a way that is very engaging for an audience, and it fucking works. While Rings of Power couldn't have done a worse job, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of trying to do something very similar, right? It seems very like reasonable and intuitive to follow the storyline that's laid before you. If an audience already likes it and they've shown that they like it, why don't you stick to that rather than having the arrogance to think, well, we know what we're doing, we're going to do our own thing, and it doesn't land, and all you do is frustrate an audience that you once had, and then you hope you're going to catch enough people, that will still like it because it's so good, because you're so fucking great at making a show. But that didn't happen, obviously, in the case of Rings of Power.
But if you haven't watched the show and you don't want spoilers, probably fast forward for the next 30 seconds. I'll just make a real quick point. They're so corporate and corporate minded that they were like, what we need to do is we'll have this big mystery on who Sauron is, and we'll make it that Galadriel falls in love with him, and he's this guy that's trying to retire, and we're gonna make Galadriel be like the guy that killed the dog in John Wick that pulls Sauron back into it, and Galadriel's the impetus for bringing him back into being a bad guy. They're trying to make him out to be this reluctant not even this reluctant villain. And it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? This is stupid.
Well, so
especially because she's already married with a kid, and it's like, oh no, we'll just say he's gone. And it's like, what the fuck is this show? That is such like, oh, they're gonna ship them, and it's gonna be this cool reveal like that everybody fucking knew immediately. Like I told you early on, I go, do you know who he is? And you're like, no. And I was like, think of a bad writer trying to subvert expectations, and you're like, oh, okay, so he's this guy. And it's like, yeah, because it's fucking obvious from the jump street, and like and it was so obvious that people were like, well, they're not gonna do that. That's just too on the nose. It's too obvious. So it's obviously he can't be Sauron. He's got to be like the Witch King or something. And it's like, no. You're giving them credit as being competent writers instead of acknowledging what you've seen throughout the show, that everything is fucking on the nose, because these guys are all fucking like, checkbox, like, okay, so we need a love story between these two, and then we're gonna, everything about the story looked like they were just like, what do audiences like in stories? Okay, so we'll take a little bit of this, we'll take a little bit of that, we'll take a little bit of this, and we'll just throw it all to fucking together. I hate those kind of fucking stories.
It has that feel. It's very much shaken up, and then and we've talked about that before, but where the episodes, it's like, this is like 4 different shows. Like, I watched one of them, I was watching it with my kids, and there was a lot of the Harfoots, I guess, and then what the hell, I don't know, there's the guys with the dwarves and the Harfoots and the kids. That's like, those are like kid show type shit, where it was like fine to watch, and then suddenly an orc shows up, and I'm like, whoa, this is like way inappropriate. Luckily, I caught it before, and it was something I'd already seen, but I knew parts of it were like fine, and they were like really into it. Then they wanted to finish watching. I'm like, nah, because once the orc shows up, it gets really inappropriate. But yeah, it's so much of it is just like, even like the fight scenes where I'm just like, man, that's so. It's like you said, it kind of has that corporate feel of like, this will look so good in the trailer. Like, oh, dude, we're gonna sell this little spot right here, and it's like, when you're watching it, even live in the show, you're like, it's like kind of nauseating. Where it's like, man, this is like pandering so much to like, not the lowest common denominator, but just to like, you think this is what everyone wants, and this is not it, man.
No, it was terrible. It was. Oh man, that was one of the most. Probably the show I hated more than anything else to watch. And if I'm judging it, and I'm saying like, and I'm taking into the context, the budget, the story, that is Tolkien, that is Lord of the Rings, and they spent $1 billion on it. To me, it's the worst show that's ever been made. And given that context, yeah, because of the budget, it looks better than like some CW show, and they were able to hire writers that, even though I think the writing is bad on the show, I think the dialogue sucked, I think the storytelling sucked, but there are stories that are worse with worse dialogue, but they spent $1 billion on this.
Some of it's beautiful.
When you spend $1 billion on something, it should at least be okay. And I don't even think it reaches that bar.
There are parts that look amazing, and it's like, that's where all of it went.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But those are just like the sweeping shots.
Yeah, they're transitions.
Who gives a fuck about transitions? Like, once you get into the sets, it looked fucking goofy. Like, they had, they did the sets for the dwarven places. It's just basically a couple of rooms. Like, they have this, we're going to show fucking Khazad Dûm, and or whatever it's called, and we're going to show it in all its glory, and then it's just like one sweeping shot in the first episode, and the rest is on these little cheap fucking goofy sets, these small sets. Compare that against like Storm's End at the end of House of the Dragon. That's a badass fucking castle. It's a huge fucking castle. It looks cool as shit.
Compare that to the shots of the dragons flying. That's how you spend money. If you're going to spend money on big, like, sweeping, epic, like, looking shots, that's how you do it. Because I now know, like, intimately what a dragon's body would look like. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like you're flying on the fucking thing.
Yeah.
It's like you see it from every angle at the point throughout the season. You see all different sizes. You even get to see them fight at the end. It's fucking dope. Not really fight, but an interaction. But it seems like with Lord of the Rings, it's like just transition shots where that looks beautiful, and then
or like you get like some New Zealand scenery that looked nice, like some of the outdoor scenery looks nice because it's New Zealand. And how can you fuck that up?
But that's why the question is like, where'd all the rest of the money go? Because if they can make House of the Dragon with so much
I,
less money and nail it, what the fuck, man? Like,
again, I'll always go back to it's the fact that they brought on two showrunners with virtually no experience in anything, no experience doing what they did, and
that's
not
what you
even really
do
much
when you have
writing
a billion.
experience or anything else. I mean, they
That's
had
what you
like
do.
one unnamed credit on a terrible movie, one unnamed writing credit on a terrible movie.
Well, that's what you do when you have $1 billion
It's fucking insane.
budget.
And that
You
shows you
skimp on the
it was a corporate
showrunners.
product where they were like, we need to bring in somebody who's just going to do what we want, and they're
Take
just
our
going to follow
notes. Yeah.
orders. But yeah,
Well,
now
they
you got
did.
the
Got the
rumors
result.
like Chris Gore broke with. All right, my computer crashed on me there. So to finish my point, um, Chris Gore from Film Threat, he had said that there was uh, there's rumors going around that at Amazon they're looking to move the creators of that show, like JD Payne and the other guy. They're looking to replace them, get a more experienced showrunner for the second season, and so that they would be. They're not going to fire them, but like maybe move them at best to like the writing room.
Yeah, it's probably a smart move. It seems like because it, like you said, I mean, you've said before, like they seem to have writers that have a lot of good credits, experience with good shows, you know. And there's a lot of things about it visually that look great. It almost feels like directing is off, but the story is also off.
It just
Garbage.
there's no way that that is not. There's too many. Too much money being spent on this. They had the ability to hire good writers, and some of those writers have worked on good shows. That's a showrunner problem that they're not reining in the people getting the best out of them. And there's
It's like
obviously it's
delegating. Yeah.
too many people making too many decisions, and it's a big giant mess. That's why like the narrative and all those kind of things, just they're all over the fucking place. But anyways, so let's so again, yeah, we're gonna cover House of the Dragon, probably not Rings of Power, but House of the Dragon, and then so be on the lookout for that on YouTube, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the Wise Man's Fear chapter 127, it's titled Anger, and in this chapter we have Kvothe after his fight with Keseret, and him and Penthe go away and talk about a little baby making.
Baby making. It's pretty classic, that whole exchange. But yeah, well, I don't know. There's a lot of ways to look at it. There's a lot of ways to go. But I guess just starting out with the progression of the chapter, it is pretty great how basically there's the whole back and forth about like he's a fucking idiot for not using his sword, but you can see it from both viewpoints where, and even his point gets made, and then they start talking about, well, what's of the Lithani, and then that's when I guess Penthe comes in. But
Yeah,
the
because
whole
like
idea of like what he'd look like if he fought her with a weapon, if somebody dropped theirs, I totally get that. If I were him, it's a completely different situation, obviously, but I want the rules to be fair and even, so I can show that I won on a fair and square sort of setting. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Which it's not fair and square because she's way better than him and everybody knows it.
yeah.
But still see where he's coming from with that point,
Well,
obviously.
like if I was in that situation, it would just depend. If I felt I could win with the sword, I would have used the sword. I would I'm not gonna give it up if I think I can win against her with it just because she gave it up. I'm not forget that like, oh, let's play fair. It's like, no. You chose to throw away your sword like an idiot. Now I'm going to take advantage of that. And so
Yeah.
that I would have in that scenario, if I felt I could beat her, I would have kept the sword. But he's not going to beat her with the sword. Even with the sword, she's going to whoop his ass. And so at that point, yeah, I mean, it would be worse if you fought her and lost with the sword, and she didn't have one.
It's
And
that
then
much more embarrassing, which is what she was setting him up for.
Yeah, so like you give it up there, and then you're in a situation where at least you're showing your courage, and you're still going to get your ass beat either way.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well do the move that's going to make you look the best. And so throwing it away there is probably the best decision.
It works out, right? Because in the end, he actually makes contact, and no
Yeah,
one. It seems like no one, including him, thought he would get as far as he did. So I think he comes out looking like a winner,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, I agree.
You know,
Yeah, and
but
then so yeah, they kind of debate that back and forth, and Shay and I like Tempe's like always, winning is always, the should be the goal you seek, and she's like, no, not always, and they're going through their little philosophical debate on it and what the proper move is, and Penthe like just kind of jumps in. It's like, yeah, well, how's your wounds? Well, let me go take care of you, and then like when they get out of there, she's like. Leading him down. It says she was leading him down the path, and then she goes, "Are you bruised badly enough to need a solve?" "Not really," I admitted. "I thought not," she said. "But after I've lost a fight, I really wish to have people tell me how I lost it." She flashed a small secret smile. So she's just like stepping in there. It's like annoying. You got two people Monday, Monday quarterbacking you right next to you to your face. Be like
yeah,
sitting
it's
there
fun.
talking to some football player finishes a game, and then you go up there, you've been watching the stands, and start telling him all the different plays that he missed and what he should have done, and he's just like, dude, like I just fucking lost, why don't you get off my back?
Yeah, this is why we have practice and we watch tape, so we can
Yeah,
remove ourselves emotionally from the circumstance and then talk about it. I'm going to do this right now when we just lost. But she also just wanted to, get some of that Kvothe loving, so get some of that anger up inside her.
yeah.
So
I love she takes him to flowers, and then she's like, Bichette told me barbarians have strange rituals with your sex. She told me if I wanted to bed you, I should bring you to some flowers. These are the best I could find in this season. She looked up at me expectantly, which is hilarious.
yeah,
Bichette, like, fucking setting her up there to troll Kvothe.
yeah.
Like, sitting there, like, oh, yeah, he needs a lot. There's a lot of rituals. He's going to need a lot of flowers. Gotta leave a mint after you leave.
A candlelight dinner. Yeah, he needs all those things. It's very, yeah, he's.
Wine and dine this kid.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Are these good enough? Is this the type of flower, or do we need different flowers?
Yeah, and so yeah, and he's like, I expect Vichette's having a joke with both of us, which she is. She's just
Yeah,
fucking
because
around with
really,
him.
I mean, in actuality, what does it take? Friction.
Yeah,
I mean, that's pretty much it, right? I mean,
at
sometimes
that
not even that.
at that age, what it takes is like, hey, do you want to? Yes, I do.
That doesn't even really necessarily take that, frankly, at that age. Just a hint of an idea, and we're good to go.
Yeah, if it's on the table, then it's go time. At that
Yeah,
age, especially in like Penthe's, seems like she's described as being very attractive. So yeah, Cabot's gonna
dude.
jump all over it.
Again, though, man. The, when she starts talking about how many babies she'd have, like, what's the deal with, like, so this is it? This is like what they do 6 times a day?
Yeah,
Like the way
man.
they talk, it's like it's
You know,
they're very proactive
how
in
many
this
meals you eat a
this
day?
land.
Like, who keeps track of these things?
It's like, hold on. So you're having that much? Jesus. You'd think he'd be stumbling a lot more people having sex the way they talk about how much they have sex.
Yeah.
Unless obviously she could just be exaggerating for effect, but yeah, she really
But we don't know
she put
how
it out
old
there.
she is. I mean, if when he says it, and we'll get there. But when he says it, she's sitting there thinking he's saying that when you have sex, you have, that's what causes a pregnancy. And she's like, I've had sex hundreds of times.
Yeah.
What? But yeah, we'll get there when we get to that part. But yeah, then so she brings up that she should not be surprised because they tell stories about the barbarians, and he asks what sort of stories. She's like, it's foolishness. They say all the barbarian men are huge. She gestured far above her head, showing a height of more than 7 feet. Naden told me he went to a town where the barbarians ate a soup made of dirt. They say the barbarians never bathe. Believing it will help them live longer. She shook her head, laughing, gesturing horrified amusement. Are you saying, I asked slowly, that you don't drink yours? Which is a
Oh,
hilarious line.
drinking the urine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He trolls her pretty good.
That's a nice little funny line. Like she's sitting there looking at him like, what? You guys just really drink your fucking piss? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah,
And
she
then
wanted to bet him. I think she'd be reluctant
it
to
shows you
make
how
out with the guy.
it shows you how isolated their community is as well. Because you think like
Yeah.
Penthe's probably in her mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and she, knows nothing of him, to where Kvothe could have played that straight and convinced her that all of them drink their own piss and bathe in dirt.
Eat dirt, drink piss, and don't bathe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, I know many of them get out and travel, but I guess they just, yeah, I guess it seems like, yeah, they're obviously very isolated, but to know that little, I mean, maybe, I guess they're so focused on themselves, they don't think nearly as much or think nearly as much about the other places and who these other societies are, which actually that's not that uncommon, right? I mean, who among us focus on other cultures. I mean, people talk about it, it's interesting, but you're not super focused on the intricacies of how people live in other parts of the world typically.
Yeah, different cultures to an extent, but like I wouldn't expect like just if you tell me all the people are like 7 foot tall and they're filing their teeth and rubbing feces on their face, be like, this is probably not accurate information. They're still people, but they're very isolated, and to the point where you could make up anything, and it shows like even though they do send out their people to become mercenaries, there is obviously a long period of time before you're ready for it in their mind. The preparation and the time and the training must be very significant and long lasting before they let you go out in the world.
That's a good point though too. I mean, it's the barbarians is everyone but them.
Yeah.
So everyone but you, like everyone but your culture is 7 foot tall. Like, yeah, that's pretty absurd to take all of that. Yeah, and it's like the ultimate example of us versus them. They're dirty and gross, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you told me like there's some isolated community that lives in the rainforest or some extremely poverty-stricken third world place where it's very isolated and they have weird customs that I wouldn't understand and that would sound extremely funny to me and or weird or gross, like that wouldn't surprise me. If you told
That
me
would be easy
everybody
to
else
sell. Yeah,
outside of the U.S. is like
yeah,
that, I'd be like, shut the fuck up. There's billions of people.
yeah.
No way everybody's like that. We're the only ones that don't do weird shit.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's believing in your own exceptionalism.
but yeah, and he mentions that they have stories as well about the ADEM, and it is very similar, where they don't understand the community, so they kind of make up stories to kind of fill in the gaps of why they're so good at fighting and all those
Yeah,
kind
they
of
do
things.
the old cob, man. Right?
Yeah,
Just weave together the realities you've concocted.
yeah, very much. And he goes, they say those that take the red never have sex. They say you take that energy and put it into your K-tan, and that is why you are such good fighters. Which you would expect, like that comes probably from the fact that when she mentions they would never have sex with a barbarian, and so that even though this is a culture that Kvothe sees, they're down to pound, and I mean they're very very down for it, but when they go out into the world, into the world with everybody else, they restrain themselves from that, and they largely don't. I mean, obviously, Bichette talks about she did, but it sounds like that's the exception, not the rule. And so, if they're out in society, they're not having sex, they're all fidgety, they're not talking to people. And people just see that as them just kind of storing their words and storing all their energy for when they explode into becoming these fighting demons. So it makes sense that that's where the stories would come from. And
Yeah,
then
I mean, it's logical. I would say it's logical.
yeah, and then she goes, I would have never made it to third stone if that were the case, she said, wry amusement. If keeping from sex gave me my fighting, there would be days I could not make a fist.
Yeah, she's a sporty one.
Say them, they're a horny bunch. They're a bunch of horny perverts.
Well, I don't know. Is pervert the right word? I mean, they're into it. It's fun.
Yeah, I
They're
don't
having a
know.
good time.
Yeah, it's
They do see well.
much.
They do seem to. Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a prioritization of sorts. But yeah, this is one of those chapters that convinces me. I mean, well, obviously because of the context, this is one of those chapters where it does kind of convince like this is very different. There's something different in this world that's not being revealed that Rothfuss is kind of leaving as a bit of a mystery, right?
Well, I think like the sex stuff is he wanted to write like a group that is views sex completely different than we do, and and then he's working into ways like how do I justify that,
Mm-hmm.
where you're talking about the STDs that people would get and those kind of issues, or the pregnancies and those kind of issues. And so if when you strip away that the STDs and the fear of getting an STD, and you strip away the fear that sex could get you pregnant, that's going to lower inhibitions quite a
They're
bit.
good. Yeah, it's. I mean, those are tremendous justifications.
The big difference, though, beyond just those kind of things, is just their culture and the way they look at sex. They look at it, obviously there are people that have different views on sex all around the world, but for the most part, you don't see cultures that are this flippant about it, where that there aren't these bonds that are built through relationships that sleeping around would be, it's not just taboo, it's like a betrayal. And it's
Mm-hmm.
because they are humans, jealousy, envy, those kind of emotions would still exist. You have things hardwired into you. Even animals are possessive, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's hardwired into animals across the world to be pretty possessive. There are exceptions to the rule, but it's to see a
It's
society of people that are all like that, for the most part. It's one of those where they're just way different than us. They're way different.
well, it certainly is an exception. I mean, because yeah, when you apply it to animal cultures, I mean, that's one of the hierarchies that exist in the animal cultures is the paterfamilias, right? The one that gets to spread his seed with the different women of that, like with apes and monkeys and shit. That's a big part of the hierarchy and how it works. And then
I,
the weaklings get fizzled out,
I would like to
of the
see
gene pool.
if I would like to find out like if the ADIM, if there's people in the ADIM that view it differently, and they do think it's more intimate and that it should be monogamous and those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things. And if they're just kind of they just browbeat that out of people, that when they have those emotions they're just getting, but like that it's, I'd be curious if it is just something that they naturally feel. That's just when they're born. The ADIM are just different, where they're just
Mm-hmm.
naturally more flippant about those kind of things, or if it's just browbeat into them from a young age to kind of, and if there's other segments of that society that disagree with them that do view monogamy as important and those kind of things. I'd be curious.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because yeah, they're clear. It's an intimate act,
Yeah.
clearly, right? But when you do strip those two things away, yeah, it would change to some degree culturally. But yeah, I'd be interested to see that as well.
But they are the way they are. And so then, so she goes, oh, she says, I would, they must think we have no sex because no Adim would bet a barbarian. And he was like, why have you brought me to the flowers then? She's like, well, you're not a barbarian now, so everybody's going to be lining up at your door. You're gonna have a lot of work to put in here before you leave.
Yeah, he's getting his ego stroked, man, out here in the Adem, man.
Is that, that gross red hair, man? There's people that
fiery...
that's why they're perverts. They got like some redhead fetish.
That's that fiery anger, man. Everybody sees it. Everybody wants it. But, it's actually also, I think it applies to virtually every culture like it does with the Adem, too. He's different, man. He's from elsewhere. He's exotic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. That's what they're going for.
They bring up the diseases, and she says, unless you're diseased, and then, they start kind of talking about it, and he's saying, I bet we're probably less diseased than you guys. She's like, okay, how many out of 100? He's like, 5. She's like, 0. It's like, none of us. Versus you're 5%, ours is 0%. That's how big the gap is.
Well, that doesn't seem right? Is that how math works? There's not a single Adem that has a disease?
Well, she's saying that if they do, she also throws in the fact that if you were to get a disease, you would go and get that shit cured.
Yeah, like they don't.
You would set down. You wouldn't just keep living in the society with it. You would go and fix the problem. You would go away. So that's how it's 0.
Yeah, they definitely do view it differently. That's for sure. It seems to be not just a point of pride. It's like disgust, pride. And even you would be like ostracized. Although they even say, you wouldn't be looked down upon for dropping all of your obligations to take care of that.
No, I mean, but that's normal. Like if there was a way to cure all STDs, and then you had people that got them and then did not do what they could do to get rid of it, and they just went around spreading it like a freaking plague ship, like you'd be like, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah. You're not just gross, you're a disgusting human being. Not just in the term of disgust, like you're a fucking scumbag. What other words can I make up for someone like that?
Yeah, if there's a way to cure it, go get it cured. Like, and it's just magic that cures it. So go get that fucking magic. Go find who's got it.
Go to the Tall or wherever you gotta go.
Stormwall Mountains. Go over to them and get that shit taken care of, and then you can come back. And then, then we can get busy again.
Got that drip.
The edema drip.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then she was so the idea that someone would give her an STD like enraged her. She's like, from one of my own vast anger, if one of the Adimre were to give me a disease, I would be furious. I would shout from the top of a cliff what they had done. I would make their life as painful as a broken bone.
Going door to door, talking about this dude. Yeah.
Tim's out here giving the edema drip. Stop having sex with this piece of shit, Tim. What a scumbag Tim is.
Use me as an example. You can use any name.
It's just a name in a Dimray.
Oh, you got a lot of Tims. Common name.
Yeah, you got a lot of Tims. Always a bad guy.
That's interesting because they don't mention any in the book.
Yeah, because they don't like Tim.
Well, there is actually a Timothy, but he's at the Rookery, I believe. Right? He works there, I think.
Yeah, it's a terrible name.
Nice.
But yeah, and then so he goes and thanks her for the flowers, and then is this enough to satisfy your barbarian rituals, or is there more that must be done? They're lovely and more than enough, I said, and bent to kiss her. And then
so he even like kind of reiterated the need.
Yeah.
With his
yeah,
he's repping his culture there, man. Like, why does he got to do that?
But and then you get her. I was right, Penthe said with a contented sigh as we lay naked among the flowers. You have a fine anger. And these are the things where they'll like talk about like, oh yeah, he has sex, and then he's just like a master at it. It's like, I mean, nothing in this book describes him as like just otherworldly. It's just people are like, yeah, that was good. I like that. I enjoyed that. that's how, sex kind of should be like that.
Yeah, if you're into it, unless you just lay there, that's really the times
if
that
you're
it's
not
bad.
getting those kind of reactions, you should step your game up. Try to mix some things up, change some things around, work in some new material.
Well, if I think back to the only times that I can think, or the times that I can think of where it wasn't great, would be when someone just basically didn't do a lot of participation. That's kind of like, eh.
Yeah, it's almost always like a rhythm thing.
Yes.
Where
yeah.
Like with a girl, it's almost always a rhythm thing. Like if they got this weird rhythm and you try to sync up to the rhythm and then they change the rhythm, like every time you match theirs, they change it. It's like, what the fuck are you doing?
That's really funny to think about. But yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, or just some other body type thing where sometimes bodies don't line up.
Reminds me of like the bad at sex reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where Jerry tells George his move and like he writes down the notes on how to do it. It's fucking hilarious. Great episode.
What was that? Was that a knuckle?
Yeah.
What are you doing to me? He just that's so great. He just turns her off so much that she's like, "Ooh, stop. Get out of here."
He was doing it wrong, so he had to bring in the notebook to get it right the next time.
It does work.
Yeah.
And she's impressed, and then she sees his hand.
Yeah.
That's such a great. This is the best show. So good.
But yeah, watch Seinfeld. If you're not getting it right, watch Seinfeld. That's a perfect demonstration of how to fix the problem. Write notes on your hand.
Well, I was going to say, the effort's
mix it up,
there.
Change things.
They don't actually give you any hints of what to do, but the swirl, right? That's what he says, the swirl. Yeah. But yes, that's good advice. Change things, try a few new things, and, have some, give a shit, give some effort.
Honk the girl's nose in the middle of it. That's always a big one. Honk. Like, what, did you just honk me? Yeah, I listened to this podcast and they kind of gave me a little tip. Women are into that.
Another one from the same show. You mean you mean the ones your mother laid out for you?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, wait, what?
She was so offended.
Why would you say that to me? I'm just trying to keep up. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, say some really weird, crass, very uncomfortable things about their family.
That reminds me of the one where Elaine whispered she was talking dirty into he was recording his set, and she recorded into the microphone. Yeah, and George is just sitting there listening to it over and over again. Gets all into Elaine. It's hilarious.
But they all do once they all three know.
Yeah.
She just has to leave because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So fucking great.
Again, another example like we were talking earlier. It doesn't take much.
No.
Just the idea. You hear it. Here's some, she gets all sultry and says some dirty things. And now she's in the room and they're all ready.
Yeah, guys pretty much always got the engine idling.
That's a good way to put it. Yep. It's always ready. It's always primed, ready to go. Doesn't take much.
No. Let's see. So then, I was right and said you have a fine anger. And he's like, what do you mean by that? I think anger might be the wrong word. I mean, Vaven, she said, using the Adamic term. Is that the same? I don't know that word, I admitted. I think anger is the right word, she said. I've spoken with Fichette in your language, and she did not correct me. What do you mean by anger, then? I asked. I certainly don't feel angry. And it's a weird, I don't know, the way she describes it, it doesn't sound like anger. It sounds more like blue balls than freaking anger. Like you're all pent up and frustrated. If you get it, like it's saying, like if men aren't having sex, they're getting all pent up and getting frustrated and acting out and acting irrationally. And there is a hint of that where, like, with you ask most guys will sit there and say, like, sometimes you got to like clean the cobwebs because you just get your mind just gets completely fixated on sex, and then unless you have it, you're just gonna be you can't clear it out of your head. And then once you do, then your mind's cleared and you go back to normal. It's like a reset button.
I think at least the way that I kind of vision it and when I come across this part is it's more like passion. And when someone's like super passionate about something, it can be directed in a proper way. But there are times when that passion being passionate about something can go badly. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And this is like she's channeling his passion in a literal sense, and taking it from him, which is kind of an interesting thing. Which I've heard people talk about that too, where they talk about seminal retention, where it's basically you
Yeah.
keep that
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
so you're absorbing her energy and you're not giving up your own. Which I've never really engaged in much, but some people
No,
swear by it.
that's never been my approach.
It feels wrong,
Yeah.
frankly, because there is a goal, and once you discover that goal, like the
Yeah.
first time, that's always the goal. Past
Well,
that,
like if the idea was like, hey, take a break every now and again, like, oh yeah, yeah, perfectly understandable. But if you're like,
mm.
no, 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 forever, like,
Yeah,
no,
that's great. That's crazy.
no,
That's crazy. I mean, the only thing that would do for me is like, all right, so just you don't want to for a minute, so it's that much better. Is that what we're talking about?
yeah.
like, no, 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 not that.
No,
Well,
you're not
then
I'm not talking about edging.
I'm gonna. Well, I'm gonna have to know. That's a hard thing to prove, right? You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have to really like. And again, I don't want to reference Seinfeld necessarily throughout the entire episode, but that's another fucking great one where George stops having sex,
Yeah,
becomes
yeah.
basically a scientist, a fucking genius. Elaine stops having sex, turns into a complete idiot.
Which
So it's
is
kind of
it's kind of the opposite of
yeah. That's what I was gonna
reality,
say.
though.
Yeah,
Because and more, it's like because you just get fixated on shit, and
yeah.
you need to scratch that itch so you can move on and start thinking about other things again.
Which isn't only sex. I mean, there's certain other things like as long as you can figure out, your way to take care of yourself monetarily, right? Make enough money to be able to do the other things you want to do, things open up, right?
But and it's similar like with addiction. I mean, like people
Yeah.
will be addicted to something, and then they can't get it out of their mind, and they get and absorbed by it, and then eventually it's just like they break down and finally succumb and take a drink or a cigarette or whatever, and then once they do that, their mind fucking
Just
chills out. Yeah,
satiate the urge, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, if you can then distract yourself with something else, direct that passion, right?
yeah,
Into something else, then you're good. So I think that's what it is. He's using anger instead, or she's using anger instead of passion. Is the way that I kind of look at it. But
yeah,
it's a funny way to put it. I do actually though kind of like the point of men have too much anger and they just basically kind of allow it to run roughshod over their thinking mind, so to speak, which definitely can be the case for sure. um, and they present that as if women have plenty of anger but they channel it in a different way or have more, I guess, control over it, which isn't necessarily always the case at all, but that's how they lay it out in this world.
Well, like when she says, this is that is very much like anger. A man who grows full of it is like a poison in him. He wants too many things. He wants all things. He becomes strange and wrong in his head, violent. And so it seems like a pent up, like
Mm-hmm.
you are. It is seems like it's an addiction that if you don't feed the addiction every now and again, like it consumes you, and that's all you just get fixated on something to violent levels and dangerous levels.
I would say that can definitely be the case. If anything that is a natural urge cannot be satiated at all, then then that can be an obsession. And then within that obsession, shit, that can be a dangerous guy.
Yeah, but apparently, yeah, them. If they don't have sex, their blue balls make them go fucking off the wall.
Yeah, apparently, I guess, according to her.
Yes, that is why anger is the right word, I think. You can tell a man who's been keeping all his anger to himself. It goes sour in him. It turns against itself and drives him to breaking rather than making. That's exactly what Blue Balls is right there. That's a perfect description of it.
I was hoping you were just basically, she was going to describe what it does to a guy, and it's basically he walks like he's been walking on been riding a horse.
Yeah. Like for the ADEM, like their balls just keep getting bigger and bigger. It's like they can physically, they can just look at an ADEM guy's balls and know how long it's been since he's had sex. It's about ready to burst. So get on that.
What a strange thing to include. It's too bad he didn't go there.
Yeah, he should have. It's implied. It's in there. But yeah, and then she talks about, but if you take the anger from a man in sex, doesn't that mean the more sex you have, the more you want? It is like the water one uses to prime a pump, she said hotly against my ear. Come now, I will have all of it, even if it takes us all day and half the night. Just having one of those little bunny rabbit sessions. Yeah, that's a young kid's game.
Yes. It does sound like she's got that urge, man. She needs to be satiated.
That's very much two young kids just having sex for the first times or whatever. She's obviously got more experience, but still in that early age, that's when that shit happens. Go off like little bunny rabbits. Get a little older, and it's like, I'm not. Like, let's take a break.
We can do other stuff.
Yeah,
there's other things we can
do. Let's go play outside and play some pickle or something.
Play pickle. Taking a pickle break?
Yeah.
That's what this is?
You don't do that?
Between bouts?
But yeah, and then he's like, is that enough for you? I said breathlessly, and we start getting into the man mothers discussion. He's like, if you take much more of it, I might not have enough anger left to speak or breathe. It is enough for now, she said, exhaustion plain in her voice. I would upset Bichette if I left you empty as a fruit with all the juice pressed out. So see, again, that's what she's talking about. Like, even talks about the big juicy plums getting pressed, juiced out.
Plums.
Feel it down in my plums.
I mean, the way she's describing it, it's like, I mean, I guess, yes, if you had so much, you wouldn't have much energy left, but I don't know about all that. Where you're just exasperated, where you can't
eventually friction's going to take its toll on you.
There's that. That's the main thing. And you're talking about those ages. That's the main thing I ran into then, and you would, both partners. Eventually, yeah, the skin.
It's gonna be like having bruises on your hips and like all kinds of problems.
Yeah, eventually get to the point where it's like, all right, well, the how great this feels is starting to grate down to where it's not feeling, still feels good, but it's balanced with
But yeah, and then she goes, uses for her anger. What does a woman have for it that a man does not? And she goes, we teach, we give names, we track the days, and tend to the smooth turning of things. We plant, we make babies, many things. So I like that because she talks about we teach, we give names, and we track the days and tend to the smooth turning of things. Because again, I think that there is likely what's going on to a large extent is that the women are more in tune with the sleeping mind, and so that they're the ones that are the namers in this society. When she's like, we give names, that's naming. She's talking about like when Kvothe gets his name, that was naming. She's like giving him a true name type of thing. Why Bichette tells him not to, tell people that name right in the next chapter. So I think they are more in tune with the sleeping mind, with naming.
So that also could lend to what you've talked about quite a few times, which is, okay, so why would they be better fighters? And if that's the key, if it's sleeping mind, is it just the arbitrary choice of Rothfuss to spin this world?
Right? Well, you have like when Kvothe calls the name of the wind, and he can see the patterns and everything.
Mm-hmm.
When he's stepping through, he even mentions, "I'm moving like Shayan."
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, when he sees the patterns of the world, he
Mm-hmm.
sees everything for, on a much deeper level, and as a much more understanding of things, he was able to move in a completely different way that he was never capable of moving before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of the power of naming, is you do have the ability, you see things at their core level, at a much deeper and impactful level. And so if they're more in tune with that side of them, it would make sense that they are better fighters because they can move better. And you don't need to be faster or stronger if you're always taking the perfect step and you're moving perfectly. Then it doesn't matter, if someone's a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. If they can't hit you, they
Mm-hmm.
can't get to you,
Yeah, yeah.
they can't do anything, then they can't beat you.
But again, so that brings me back to that question though. But why women in
I
this
don't know. I
endeavor?
mean, it could be that it's, they came from, a woman Ruach or something, and it was just a specific genetic trait that got passed down to them from, Ruachs, basically like the the gods coupling with the people having demigods, but the
Mm-hmm.
part of the genetics of this particular strain, this Adem people, the genetics is favors the women for the most part. Or it could be that it's a teaching thing, that they're not teaching the men the
Yeah.
naming. They're the men. So like occasionally a man is good at it naturally, kind of like Kvothe, but for the most part, maybe it is they're spending the time coaching and teaching the women on naming, and they have such a society that they look down on men to a significant
Mm-hmm.
degree. So it
Mm-hmm.
could be that it's just part of the culture and how they're being raised and taught, and that's, the women are just taught in a way that makes them more attuned to to naming and the sleeping mind.
Yeah, I was thinking that myself. I mean, because that could be a possibility, obviously. And it would all stem from something, right? And it could be a connection of both those things, right?
Yeah,
Could be that's how it started within their world, so that's what continues,
yeah,
right? The most powerful. I'm trying. I can't remember their names now. Eighth and Wraith. Is that
yeah,
it? Eighth and
yeah,
Wraith. The most powerful was the woman, right? The other was a man, right? It
yeah.
wasn't
It
two
was kind
women.
of. I mean, they were kind of both. I mean, she was his student, and
Yeah,
so
but she
he
ended
was
up
the
being.
badass, though. No, I mean, he
Yeah,
was the badass, and then she eventually became like his equal. But it was
yeah.
never. I don't think it was ever like written that like she surpassed him, but she taught him as far as like the Lothani and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. So
Hmm.
she's viewing things in a different way than him.
Well, yeah. I mean, kind of what I take from the end of that story is that she, in that action, that final sort of action, did supplant him or whatever, overcome him in terms of because she taught him a lesson, right? And then that became basically his or what her dying words basically became the Lithani, right?
Yeah, yeah. The
Or the
99
Kingkiller.
stories
Yeah,
were like the
yeah.
beginning of
So
it.
maybe that's me. I don't know. Maybe that's the point because if he was the teacher, then she, maybe that's kind of that point of demarcation that kind of spun everything out where the women kind of reign there. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to think about because I'm trying to pull from these different types of subjects, different types of events, to see if they give us more, or if eventually what it all just comes down to is Rothfuss just made a choice. This culture, this is what I want. You know what I mean? Or if
Hmm.
he's giving us a little bit more. And I think that Eighth and Wraith story hints at least some origin where that could come from.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's showing kind of a difference similar to what Penthe's talking about as far as the anger and the men with their being more irrational and prone to anger and violence, whereas she was, she like just threw the ribbon down. She could have killed him. She
Hmm.
could have, but she didn't. She chose a different path and tried to, educate him and build up. So she is definitely in a matriarchal society, she's obviously the ideal compared to him. Although they're both significantly good at fighting and shooting arrows. Obviously, they were extremely good at that, and but the person they look to the most would be her.
Yeah.
But they're both legendary figures in their world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's tough to say.
That's also kind of interesting though too, because since they're both integral figures, it also hints at the, as mythology and lore, it hints at it takes both man and woman to do this, right? To make the society function, blah blah blah. But what we get from this dialogue between Kvothe and Penthe is no.
No, yeah, they really look down on the men. They really, I mean, like to the point where they pity them.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah, to the point where they literally feel sorry and like sorrowful for it. And it's interesting to sort of weave that into the storyline.
That would make me turn into like the opposite. I would be talking about how much I pity you. Like, you pity me, I pity you.
Pity the fool?
Yeah, I pity the fool. And then Kvothe brings up the man mothers. A man can do those things as well, I said. Penthe chuckled. You have the wrong word, she said, rubbing at my chin. A beard is what a man makes. A baby is something different, and that you have no part of. We don't carry the baby, I said, slightly offended, but still, we play our part in making it. And then she turns and looks at him, smiling as if I'd made a joke. Then her face faded. She propped herself up on her elbow and looked at me for another long moment. Are you in serious? Seeing my perplexed expression, her eyes grew wide with amazement. She sat upright on the bed. It is true, she said. You believe in man-mothers, she giggled, covering the bottom half of her face with both hands. I never believed it was true. She lowered her hand, revealing an excited grin and gestured amazed delight.
Dude,
I love that part so much. The condescending, like, and the just how fucking silly she thinks that his ideas are. She can't even restrain it, like keep it from her face.
It's so funny that every time I read this, it still kind of like pisses me off. Like I get a little pissed where it's like, for one, if you're Kvothe and she's like, oh man, you make a beard, that's it. Like,
yeah,
that's all I do. And I don't even do that. Like it's not even my thing. All I have to do is be alive, and that happens. Like that's how little you think a dude fucking adds to the world. What are you talking about?
With that line, that's very much like the stereotype, shows that will like show the men in the office in the 60s or 70s, like slapping the secretary on her ass or laughing at her. She introduces an idea and they laugh and mock her. You're just a woman. What would you know? Ha 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 ha. Go make me a sandwich. Like she's like the woman version of that.
Yeah.
You make a beard, silly man. You silly man.
He does a pretty shitty job of making his argument.
It would be tough without
it would be
without scientific like proof. Like when you have DNA and those kind of things, it's a different story where they can like show with 99.9% certainty who the father is from one person to the next. And when you have like you don't have any books or anything at hand and you're explaining it to someone who thinks it's just completely ridiculous, they're going to start poking holes in things. I thought the way she poked holes in things makes sense to me.
Yeah, it
would get frustrating if I was Kvothe, like trying to prove it. How would you prove something like that? I don't know specifically. I don't know how I would go about proving it. I would just be throwing out things, but then they would have, I could think of counter arguments to anything I could throw out. That if you thought it was nonsense, similar to like when you look at like the flat Earth fucking people and they got their theories, like you can go point by point, and if you go point by point, they can have a response to every single point that would make sense on its own, stand alone, it would make sense. Problem is, it's just like their point on one thing contradicts their point that they would make on another thing. They don't have like a theory that is coherent all the way through, that all the different points, connect to each other and they all line up and it's all coherent. So when they say like, oh, the answer to A is Z, well, but then and the answer to B is Y, but it's like, but Y and Z contradict each other. They both can't be true. And you get frustrated like those kind of things. It'd be similar in this situation where you throw out a response to them and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense because of this, which on the surface, you could see where that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's just their theory, and their theory might be true. It might be true for them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in terms of their world, that obviously hangs over all of it. But
with as much sex as they have, and they're not taking any precautions against pregnancy, their women should be pregnant constantly, having 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 kids. They should just be getting pregnant all the time.
Okay, it made me laugh when he's like, oh, well, I eat this bark every day to make sure I'm not. I was like, wait, hold on, dude. But then I did realize, oh, wait, he is actually actively having sex now. But when he said that, I'm like, hold on, bro. What are you talking about? How long have you been doing this? Like, like the idea that he's been taking precautions this entire time when he has wasn't sleeping with anybody. He's just eating it anyway. Just kind of cracked me up every time I come across that. I'm like, yeah, it's funny to
me. And like the other things, like you better hope there's not any kind of long-term consequences with sterilizing yourself every fucking day.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, I mean, especially with his from what we're getting through the books, not a real strong possibility he's going to be having kids. But who knows? Who knows how long he's going to live? And
yeah, you always got the the theories from people that Bast is one of his kids.
Yeah, that came to mind. But also with people come out of the doldrums at some point. So if that eventually happens, but what I was going to say is with his bloodline and that'd be a real shame, to not pass that on.
Well, maybe not. Maybe you want that line if it's the line of Iax and Haliax, and then the destruction he imposes on the world. You maybe want to cut that thing short. Go ahead and
maybe
shove as much tree bark in your mouth as you can get.
Well, maybe just temper it down a little bit. Get with somebody that's from the other spectrum, completely on the other end, docile. Doesn't do anything bad, stays in their lane.
I love this part where he's like, are you not making a joke? Do you truly believe a man puts a baby in a woman? Well, yes, I said a little awkwardly, in a manner of speaking. It takes a man and a woman to make a baby, a mother and a father. You have a word for it? That's so fucking funny to me. It would be so frustrating when you're like, look, I know your idea is completely backwards, but then they're mocking you, and you're like, no. Like you're 100% wrong. It's not even, this even shouldn't even be up for the debate.
But in their culture, you're a fucking joke.
Yeah.
And it's a long running joke.
Like something like where do babies come from? This is something that people figured out a long fucking time ago. Way before, books were invented, people knew where babies came from. Even animals instinctively know where babies come from.
Yeah. That's so again, that leads to that question again, what the fuck is up with their world? What's going on with them anatomically?
Again, I think it's probably that there's something different about them because, like she goes, she looked me stunned, silenced, then dissolved helplessly into laughter, trying to speak for several times, only to have it overwhelm her again when she looked up at the expression on my face. Penthe put her hands on her belly, prodding it as if puzzled. Where's my baby? Perhaps I've been sexing wrong these years. I should have I have 100 babies if what you say is true. 500 babies. That's if she's having that much unprotected sex, and all the women are having that much unprotected sex. There should be a ton of pregnancies all the fucking time.
So then what? They just go to a certain place at a certain time of the year. They said like the fall, right?
She just says it happens. She's like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Just sometimes you get pregnant.
No, but I thought there was. They
said it happens
something,
more often at some times than others.
which leads to part of what Kavo's saying, where it's like, yes, there's ovulation period. That's a thing, and then you have a higher probability of getting pregnant within that period of time. But she's not having that. Which they didn't go into ovulation. Why didn't they talk more about menstrual cycles and stuff? That would be great.
Yeah. They needed to, like, that's one thing they really should have focused in on, and Kvothe should have been making the point, like, when you bleed every month, you know what's happening?
Yeah, we get all the toilet paper talk. We don't get, I hear about tampons, maxi pads.
That's what he should have brought up too, though. Because what if she was like, "What are you talking about? Bleed every month? Talking about from fighting?"
Yeah, that'd be interesting, right?
And then you find out, like, oh, they don't, or they have completely different cycles, where it would make sense that they wouldn't expect sex leads to pregnancy. Because again, if they're having that much, there should be a ton of pregnancies. The amount of people that they have should be expanding significantly at a significant rate.
What if they dye all their clothes red, just for just to cover?
That's why.
That part of that way they don't get embarrassed.
Yeah,
when it happens. Yeah, I mean, again, that's an important question. And if that's not the case, then yes, anatomically they are different.
But I mean, you would think like they have no taboos on sex, and doesn't sound like their pull-out game is strong. It sounds like they're just going for it, and so it sounds like their society should be growing by leaps and bounds, especially with how often they stay in a dim ray. It doesn't sound like it sounds like they stay there for a long period of time before they eventually go out. Like you would think, like all these women would be all of them would be pregnant all the time.
Am I wrong? Do I get the impression that there's a lot more women in their society than men? Is that not? I don't know if that's
I don't know if that's the
case. Well, it's just all the characters we hear about. We don't hear about any men.
We only hear about a handful of characters. I mean, we do hear about men, like the guys running the shops and those kind of things in Tempe, and we hear about men,
but not a lot. Is what I'm saying.
Well, we don't hear a lot about a lot of women. It's just and the women are the ones that are in charge. It's a matriarchal society, so they are going to be the focal point of this part of the story. But I don't. There's nothing in there that says that there's significantly more women ADEM than men ADEM.
The point we just talked about, how they're stronger and more intellectual, and they basically run shit in this world, also hurts the theory that people have that Rothfuss is like a sexist, or
that's one of the most and especially with his political views. He is so far on the to the left on those kind of things that it's just like, dude, if he's a bad guy in your mind, like from that angle, like who's the good people?
Yeah, what the hell are you talking about?
I'm guessing anybody who's like accusing him of being a sexist, I bet you if you hung around that person's filled with a lot of hate all day long.
Well, yeah, it would. It also feels like you're picking a fight because there's sex in the book.
That's what I mean. It's a person that is just walking around angry and looking for reasons to be mad.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I mean, do you want books without sex? Because they're out there. They're not as well rounded. If you're talking about if you're focused on a character's evolution, right? Who's young, it should be a part, man. It's got to be. It's an important part of fucking development. So, and it's an important part of reading for a character because it's part of our world.
It's an absurd. It's such an absurd critique that I don't even take. When people say that, I don't take them seriously. Like I just, again, I think that's a person with some kind of issues.
I get the feeling what I've got when I haven't delved into them for a while, but like the Reddit threads and stuff, I start to get the feeling like people just repeat what other people are saying. Like they're just repeating other people's critiques because it's so weak.
Yeah.
To hear it more than once, it's like, why are other people picking this shit up just to have a? And I know a lot of people do that. They just read somebody else's critique and they just want to participate. So now they're like, well, let me throw my hat in the ring and repeat what someone else said. I
Yeah,
don't know
I
why
mean,
people get
and
off on that.
there's, I have no problems with, like, people want to critique it, but if your critique amounts to, like, this person's a bad person, he's evil, then it's like, dude, shut the fuck, move the fuck on.
It's not about the book. It's not about the
Like,
book.
you're not
You're not
even
even
talking
talking.
about the story or the
Yeah,
writing or
exactly.
anything. You're just throwing out insults.
Yeah, it's yeah, frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, if you want
To
to
say the least.
critique the writing and, like, critique how he writes women or how he writes these kind of things, fine. But yeah, if you're just going he's a bad person, I'm a great person, and I'm so much better than him as a person, it's like, shut the fuck up, dude. You're annoying. Um,
You're also not a great person. So
yeah,
shut the fuck up, man.
yeah.
You're displaying that right now.
But yeah, and then I've been. She goes, and you have done this. She asked, looking at me with mock seriousness, with a smile tugged at her mouth. Have you made a baby with a woman? I've been careful not to do such thing at you, Bark. And then this is more of your barbarian sex rituals. She said, "Does bringing a man to the flowers also make a baby where you come from?" And he's like, "If men do not make, help with making babies, how do you explain that babies look like their fathers?" Which, when she responds, like, babies look like angry old men, all bald and with blah, blah, blah. I would have been like, no, no, no. I'm talking like the kids. They grow up and there's kids that look
Mm-hmm.
identical to their dad. Like,
Yeah.
they grow up and they look like almost the same fucking person.
That's what that was one of the examples what I meant by like he doesn't do a great job
No, that was
of
one of the
because
bad ones, yeah.
he's just kind of getting emotional and it seems like he gets like mentally stymied, which is also understandable again for the reasons you brought up where it's like you would be taken aback with like wait this whole fucking culture thinks I'm a laughing stock for believing what's 100% not just true but everyone knows this is the case. um, yeah, that's. I mean,
I mean, so
it's
many
quite a position to be
so
put
many
in.
kids as they're growing up, they look like their
You can
mom
see
and dad.
both.
You
Yeah,
can
you can see
fucking
both.
see.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. Well, and it makes sense, but it's one of the really interesting things. And then having multiple kids and see how different they can look, but still also look like each other. You know.
So that's why I think there's probably something to it in their society, in the way their biology works, because they're not all pregnant and they're having tons of unprotected sex. That doesn't make any sense. Their numbers they're not just having exploding birth rates
Mm-hmm.
with as much sex as they have unprotected. That should be the case. They should be outpacing other people, other groups of people who don't do what they do and don't view sex the way they view it. They should be outpacing them on the birth rates by a significant degree. And we don't see any evidence of that. Maybe that's the case, but we don't see any evidence of it. But you would think if it was the case, their views would be different. If all the kids look like their mom and dad, their views would be different. Like they would pick up on. They're not stupid, so they should
Mm-hmm.
be able to pick up on these things, unless they are different.
Maybe it's all the fighting. You know. Maybe that creates a lack of making
So there's a
babies.
new science, and I mean, that would still be a
Yeah.
new science. That's not an actual
Yeah.
thing.
Well, it. I mean, doesn't it feel like there's something there is something there's something anatomically different? It feels like it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
suggesting
think
that
they're a different type of person. I think that they're
like a different
like a
species.
fae creature. How do
Mm.
fae procreate? Is it the same? I don't know. Could be different.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like yeah,
How did the Ruach procreate? I don't know. So, like, it could be that they're different, and it seems like they're different because much of their society doesn't make sense if given what we know about them. If they aren't different, then most of this section of the book doesn't make a lot of sense. So when there would be so many holes in the story if they're not different. And which is why I don't think that's what Rothfuss is going for. I think Rothfuss would be smart enough to pick up on most of these holes so that he would just make them, they're different.
That's what I was saying earlier. I mean, it seems he puts way too much thought into what he puts in the book to think he just made this arbitrary choice. Now, maybe he started with an arbitrary choice, but that doesn't matter because he gives reason for everything, right? He's very careful about the stepping stones that lead to what happens to these characters, how they form the way they do, you know. And yeah, so something's going on, something different.
Yeah, you know? I'm almost positive that they're actually physically different. But then you get, eventually Penthe waved a hand to stop me, gesturing exasperation. Do you hear your own excuses? Sex makes babies, but not always. Babies look like man mothers, but not always. Sex must be at the right time, but not always. There are plants that make it more likely or less likely. She shook her head. If you must realize what you say is thin as a net. You keep sewing new threads, hoping it will hold water. But hope does not make it true. Which is funny, considering that's how I would have viewed her, her positions on the thing. Like, it just happens.
I like her. I actually like that wording though for the that metaphor.
Yeah,
I like that wording, how that describes it. And but yeah, I mean, he could throw the same thing right back at her. Like, what are you talking about? But no.
Yeah, but and then she's like, seeing me frown, she took my hand and gestured comfort into it as she had before in the dining hall, all the laughter gone out of her face. I can see you think this truly. I can understand why barbarian men would want to believe it. It must be comforting to think you are important in this way, but it is simply not. She's like, sometimes a woman ripens. It's a natural thing, and men have no part in it. That is why more women ripen in the fall, like fruit. This is why more women ripen here in heart, where it is better to have a child. Seeing my expression, Penthe squeezed my hand and gestured concession. Perhaps it is different for barbarian women, she said. You are only saying that to make me feel better, I said sullenly, and was overcome with a jaw-popping yawn. I am, she admitted. Then she gave me a gentle kiss and pushed at my shoulders, encouraged me to lie back down on the bed. And you get, when she starts talking about, like, it must be hard to be a man, she said softly. A woman knows she is part of the world. We are full of life. A woman is the flower and the fruit. We move through time as part of our children. But a man, she turned her head and looked at me with gentle pity in her eyes. You are an empty branch. You know when you die, you will leave nothing of import behind. I feel like, hey, go fuck yourself first. First off, go fuck yourself. 2, go fuck yourself some more.
Hey, fuck you, man. Yeah, it's really funny. She's like her pity, and then she just lays it on thick. It's like, all right, fuck face.
Yeah. I like that. That's her idea of comforting him.
Yeah.
Be like, no, you would just be setting me off. You're fucking fucking insult me.
I like picturing, like, she's like, like caressing the side of his face, and he goes, "You should just kill yourself."
Yeah, you're meaningless. Your life is meaningless and stupid. Ha ha ha.
It's okay. I have a great life, though. Everything I do means everything.
Yeah.
But you're just worthless. I thank you for the anger.
He should have shot back. Hey, men rule and women drool. Yeah, take that, Penthe.
Okay.
Let's go back and throw childish insults.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah. Penthe stroked my chest fondly. I think that is why you were so full of anger. Maybe you do not have more than women. Maybe the anger is you simply have no place to go. The anger in you simply has no place to go. Maybe it is desperate to leave some mark. It hammers at the world. It drives you to rash action, to bickering, to rage. You paint and build and fight and tell stories that are bigger than the truth. She gave a contented sigh and rested her head on my shoulder, snuggling herself firmly into the circle of my arm. I'm sorry to tell you this. You are a good man, and a pretty thing. But still, you are only a man. All you have to offer the world is your anger.
I like what she described there in terms of, like, you have to do all these things to leave a mark, right?
Yeah.
To be something. And that everybody has that. Everybody has that to some degree, And so I like that. I like that that's thrown in there. That's kind of recognized, and it would make sense for that recognition cast in this light, where it's like, well, why is there that motivation? Well, the motivation is, if not, just a worthless piece of shit, like you said. I'm an empty
Well,
branch.
and it's also, part of, built into our DNA. I mean, the men you're just naturally, and same with animals, the men are naturally more on that, spread. That's their goal, whereas the women are more in the, the nurturing, and so, if the women were just like the men, it would be fucking a-dem sex romp all day long. And so, you just have a difference where, men are out there, it's just programmed into you to want to go out and spread that seed around, whereas women are more nurturing than men. By, obviously there's exceptions to rules, blah blah blah, all that bullshit for people who are sensitive, but that's for the most part, that's what it is.
No, it's interesting
as a general rule of thumb.
It's interesting too how you point that out, because that kills all the isolation too. Because then it's like, we're fucking awesome. Let's spread this all over the world. We should all be a-dem, Then it's like, everybody, let's conquer everything, right?
Yeah.
That kind of falls in that same line, rather than let's keep everything here. We'll send a few people out just to bring some shit back, and that's their whole culture, is just go out, come back, right, and support the tree, support that area. Rather than branching out much at all. I mean, well, at all.
Just men and women are just, very similar in a lot of ways, but also very different in a lot of ways. I've never hung out with a woman who was going specifically out to get in a fist fight with people. Those kind of things. But I've had that happen with numerous men going out specifically looking to get in a fight. And women I've been with women though that will do things where that, I don't see a lot of men do, where it's they're more vicious in a lot of ways, and than men, where they're mentally badger a woman that's supposedly their friend and just mentally break women down. I've seen those kind of things where it's that's a woman thing. That doesn't happen a lot with men.
Yeah, it's an interesting focal point, but yeah, that's definitely and I'm sure a little bit of, I'm sure there's some of that in each, but yeah, that's much more of a it seems a consistent rule from what
a
I've
man
seen.
Yeah, a man is much more likely to punch you in the face, whereas a woman's much more likely to psychologically go to war with you
And help you develop a eating disorder.
Yeah.
Shit like that.
Yeah,
I've heard this.
I mean, it's the case. I mean, it's not, and again, it's not like all women are like that. I mean, but it is, if you're going to see that kind of behavior, it's much more likely to happen with a woman than a man. There's exceptions to rules, obviously, and it goes both ways. There's violent, physically violent women, and there's emotionally manipulative men. But you don't have a lot of, I don't experience a lot of male friendships where they're psychologically torturing each other. And then you got women, you date a girl, and it's just God damn, you guys are friends? You're not even just talking shit for fun. You guys are fucking vicious and mean to each other. Holy shit, what is going on?
Yeah, it's very strange. It's a strange thing, yeah, because I mean, only way you see that with guys is where it's that's a family member, because if it wasn't, you're not friends.
No.
You don't stay friends with people you
you're going to get in a fight at some point. You're going to be dude, what the fuck? Get the fuck away from me.
That's a little different, though, because even friends will eventually fight. They spend enough time around each other for a long time. They'll eventually get into disagreements. And
yeah, but if someone's trying to wage psychological warfare with me and they're a man, I'm going to fucking punch them at some point.
Yeah. It's also, it wouldn't figure in my mind. If I was driven to want to do that to somebody, I don't want to be around them. That doesn't make sense.
There's a show, New Girl, I think, is the one with what's her face, Zoe Deschanel.
Deschanel, yeah.
Whatever that show is she's on. They had an episode where they kind of dealt with like the women having their psychological war with each other, and the men just the physical violence. They pretty much did that those tropes, and the women like they got mad at each other because they found out one of the girls they both saw a purse that they liked and decided neither were going to buy it, and then he's like, "Oh, I've seen that purse, you bought it," and then the other girl like kind of just doesn't like say she's mad. She's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna go home now. Like, have a good day. Like, okay, bye." And they're doing those kind of things, but there's underneath they're basically telling each other to go fuck themselves, type of thing. And so they have this big play out like that, where eventually the guys start kind of emotionally manipulating each other, and then the women turn to physical violence and feel better when they start punching each other.
Nice.
And it's like there's a great part at the end. Like the two guys are kind of emotionally manipulating each other and getting on an elevator. And one of the other friends like walks on and he kind of looks at them being like that. And he just punches both of them in the nuts. And he's like, "Are we good? Good?" And they're like, "Yeah. We're good. We're good."
Yeah, you got to reset this whole thing.
Yeah. So funny episode dealing with exactly what we're talking about.
That's really funny because the way two dudes would do it would be an immediate like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah,
it's immediately.
I would call you out on it. I would be like, you're clearly trying to fucking emotionally manipulate me. Like, quit being a fucking punk.
Yeah, it would be immediate. None of the passive aggressive type shit where it's like, I can't believe you would do that. And just go home, think about it. Yeah. What the fuck? That is anytime like that's what I'm saying. I mean, if there was a possibility of anything like that, that's someone I would just never talk to again. No, I wouldn't. It wouldn't go down some layer like some whole thing of revenge. It'd be like, I'm done. That's it. Yeah. That's it. It's either call them out and then it's over, or I'm just never talking to this person ever again. So that's it. It's one of the two.
Yeah. I don't. Girls are different. They're very different from us, and I'm sure that they would be. They would have their things that they would think. That we're outlandish on.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm certain of it. I hear that shit from my wife all the time.
But they're wrong. Yes, we are awesome, and they're the ones with the problems. Yeah, we are great.
Misunderstanding. Yeah. And I'm gonna spread that seed all over the world.
Yeah. Punch random people in the face too. But yeah, so that covers that chapter, and then next episode we'll be jumping into his conversation about his name, and then we get the Cheyenne given the Chandrian names.
Yeah, that's a big one.
We're getting into the true names of the Chandrian next episode. So that's a much bigger episode, and there's some theory stuff to kind of dive into with her story that she tells about the Chandrian and the cities that were betrayed and save one person remember the Lothani, those kind of things. So that's going to be a good one to dive into as far as theory shit. But that's it for his time at the Adem. After that chapter, and then the next chapter is an interlude where Bass kind of chides him about saying the names, and then he's saying his buys and on to meeting the fake Rue Troop immediately after that.
The name section of it, man. I mean, that's going back to episode 1.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about that from the beginning. That's how. I mean, it's vital. It's vital to the overall story. I mean, it kind of spins a lot of the connections that eventually get made, because Rothfuss is great about that. He reiterates certain things, so you get that connection of like, okay, so this is definitely the case, and this is there's more to something here or there. Yeah.
And then the other thing I bring up is we did a live stream where we got on Reddit and just read different posts and responded to them. Just kind of hopped online one day, so I haven't posted that on the podcast. So you check that out on YouTube. It's broken up in 2 sections, but yeah, we went through a bunch of the different posts one day, talked about them on different theory stuff. So if you guys want to check that out, you can. Just I'll put the links in the description for, same as always, in for YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. But be on the lookout to, again, subscribe on YouTube. So when we start doing the live streams, you'll be notified when that happens, and you can kind of join in if you guys watch House of the Dragons, you want to shoot the shit about it, jump in when we do those live streams. But if you follow on Twitter or Instagram, I'll post about it before we do. I'll let you guys know ahead of time when we're going to be doing those streams.
Do you want me to tell you what happens at the end of the season?
The end of House of the Dragon?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happens at the end of the end of the book.
Oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
We'll try to
exact ending. We might talk about like spoilers, but if we talk about spoilers, we'll save it to the end. There will be some spoiler stuff because there's interesting stuff to talk about that, they might not even cover in the show, but it's worth talking about. So, but I'll save that for the end. We'll just go through. We won't give any spoilers what's going to happen in, season 2 or beyond from the book. But then at the end, I'll go in and we'll do a spoiler section where I'll bring up a handful of points on things that I hold back on.
I don't know. Yeah, there seems to be plenty in terms of making connections from, the what, how many years prior? I mean, the beginning of what is it? Fire and Blood. How long does it go? Like 1,000?
The story we're at right now is about 185 years. It starts about 185 years before Robert Baratheon died. Okay. And then the Jaehaerys' reign ended at about like the 100-year mark of the Targaryen reign. Because it was like 26 years for Aegon the Conqueror. Then Aenys had like 5. And then Maegor had 6. And then Jaehaerys had 55.
Shit, I thought it went way further back than that.
No. So their reign was basically about 300 years total.
It's not that long.
No, but the Doom of Valyria and those kind of things, the Valyria goes way back. They've been around forever, or they were around forever.
So the Targaryens, this is George R. R. Martin's way of glorifying America.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
America,
fuck yeah. Riding our dragons to save the fucking day, yeah.
Oh man, they should have one episode of, that so doesn't keep with the tenor of the show, but one episode where the beginning, instead of like going to the,
the way they do it is like have 2 of the young kids, like Daemon's kids, like go up and high five each other, and they're like Targaryens, and then they high five, and then Daemon comes into the screen and goes, "Fuck yeah."
That's the nod. That's a lot. That's a lot more below. Yeah, a lot more under the radar than I was going. I was going to go with literally the opening to the episode is a whole.
Yeah.
America, fuck yeah.
America Team Police.
And they slow it down, because remember that was one of the other parts of the movies where they're America, fuck yeah, where they slow it down as a ballad,
Kind of, when we give our ideas, we kind of sound like the corporations that I criticize, where we're like, we'll take a little bit from this and a little bit from that, just shove it into everything.
Yeah, we talk about that all, montaging everything. Yeah.
Well, that's what Rothfuss did. He montaged the shit out of it, all that. We're just finding it. We're just discovering it in Rothfuss.
If someone just gave us $1 billion, man.
Yeah.
Fucking make this shit happen.
There's so much product placement in this fantasy series.
The $1 billion wasn't enough, man. That wasn't enough to line my pockets. I got to get a Taco Bell. I got to get a Jack in the Box.
I need to fucking cut down on some of these costs. Got a lot of franchises. They got to fucking foot some of this bill.
Yeah, we got to find a leather outfitter for the leather dusters. I don't know who that would be exactly.
He just goes into a big and tall shop to get it.
They just make it for him. I mean, they already had the leather big and tall, leather duster laying in the back.
But yeah, so be on the look for the House of the Dragon, and then we'll be up to towards the end of his time in ADEM. We are at the end of his time in ADEM on the next episode for this. And other than that, peace out and suck on that.
Yeah, suck on him.
Suck on him. Juicy plums.